Are you allowed to date on the cruise ship? Not only do we work on a cruise ship, we also live on the cruise ship. And one thing about living is part of life for some people is dating. And yes, people do date while working on a cruise ship. Probably the biggest rule, one of the biggest rules of any cruise ship, any cruise line, you can't date a guest if you work there. Crew members cannot be with the guests. Can't do it. Have crew members been with guests? Yes. Do they get fired? Yes. One of my ships, a guy brought a passenger, female passenger, to his crew cabin. Well, passengers aren't allowed in crew areas anyway, but he brought her to his cabin. He got fired. Another one of my ships, a guy went into a passenger's cabin. He got fired. Can't do that. I had a guy on one of my ships, we had a crew party. A crew party. The captain was there. Staff captain was there. The directors were at the crew party. It was up on the pool deck. He brought a guest to the party, was dancing with her on the dance floor, and he was making out with her. At the crew party. He got fired. I don't know why these people feel the need to do this. I think you'll notice it was mostly guys getting fired. Yeah, I mean, you could probably say that the majority of these poor decisions are made by certain people, but that's a whole different scenario. I mean, it's not worth it. There's plenty of people on the cruise ship that you are allowed to be close with. 1,200 at least crew members? Come on. Now, the thing about it though, for the most part, the majority of cruise ships employees are men. I don't know, something like 70% to 30% women, 80% to 20%. It's something pretty super skewed. So I guess as a female, you know, you can be a little picky, you know, and then some of these guys kind of chase, you know, their options are limited, you know, so so for some people it's like, you know, they're aggressive, like, what about you, what about you, what about you, you know. Other people, if it happens kind of thing. One of the most difficult things when it comes to dating and relationships on cruise ships is privacy. There's no privacy on the cruise ship. Like, everyone you work with is going to know everything that you do. Your managers are going to know things. You can't, there's nowhere to hide. There's no privacy. And on top of the whole personal privacy, social privacy, you will likely have a roommate or more than one. So you don't have any physical privacy. So when you're dating, your dating is going to be public. Now, depending on how you go about it, or depending on who you date, there's different levels of privacy and how much of your relationship is public, you know. But for the most part, it's not going to be someone's going to know, no matter what you do. So for instance, if you're not dating, if you're just looking for something for like a one night stand kind of thing, it's not going to be a secret, you know. And if you get a reputation, you know, you might lose friends. You know, see, it's a very fickle social standpoint, you know what I mean? But you are allowed to date crew members as a crew member, and it can work. I have seen many a couple stand through time, you know, and contract after contract, you know, even dating different ships, living in different countries. People can make it work. If you want to make it work, much like on land though, If you are in a long distance relationship with someone, if you both want to make it work, you can make it work. It is very, very hard, and there's different levels of difficulty, and my threshold for relational difficulty is probably lower than some. It might be higher than some, So from my experience, dating is challenging. My first contract, I was dating a girl from Holland. So here's the thing. The cool thing about dating on cruise ships is you are surrounded by people from different cultures, different languages, different ages, different everything. And depending on where you're from, there's people and kinds of people and kind of personalities that you have never been around, And so for some people, they discover who they're attracted to, and they would have never known had they not worked on cruise ships. You know what I mean? So you can find love. I mean, if that's what you're looking for, it is possible. And you learn a lot about yourself and a lot about what you want and who and what works for you, when it comes to different people. And that's not just dating, that's also with relationships, You discover different personalities and stuff like this. So that's why I think working on a cruise ship is an incredible experience for many, many reasons. But the first girl I dated was from Holland, and it was fine. She worked in the spa, and I was a broadcast technician. The thing about dating on the cruise ships, though, is you're limited to the cruise ship. I look at there's dating and in a relationship to me are two separate, finite, solid black line differences. Dating is when you're going on dates, and in a relationship is when you've both established verbally, consciously, that you both are committed to each other, for each other. But it has to be like a discussion, It's not just we went on one date and now we're boyfriend, girlfriend. It's like, no, I look at it the same on land, You can date, you can go on lots of dates with lots of people, but because you're dating. But it's only when you've committed. The commitment is the relationship part. The thing about cruise ships, time tends to go by differently than on land. It seems to be kind of in a hyper state, right? So, and a lot of that comes from living there as well. So you're surrounded by these people like 24/7, and it's like these people are easily accessible to be with people, both friends, So you might go on 2 or 3 dates, and then you're in a committed relationship, but it could take 3 days. You see what I mean? But on land, you might go on 3 dates, 1 date every Saturday, and then it takes a month before you get to this, should we even commit? You know what I mean? So it just moves a lot quicker for most people. And so what happens is you tend to fall into these relationships faster, harder, you know what I mean? And so and on top of that, if you think about, I'd say the average contract is about 6 months. So if you meet somebody day one somehow, and for some reason they're also on the ship that same day for the same amount of time, the longest relationship you can have on the ship is 6 months. So there's already like a countdown. You don't think about it that way, but it's true. You start thinking about it toward the end, but chances are your contracts are going to end at different times. So things that go through your mind sometimes are not the same things that go through on land. Like on land, you're not sitting there thinking, I'm leaving, and we live in different countries and at a certain date, and we're aware of what date, and there's a chance we may never ever see each other ever again for the rest of our lives. But you don't talk about that because it's not romantic, right? So you just kind of date, and what happens because it seems in such a hyperdrive state on the cruise ship, you could date and be in a relationship for like a month, and you're in it way deeper than a month on land, right? And so that's why you're like, oh, I think we can make it work. You live in Europe and I live over here, and you'll make it work, So it's hard, but the most difficult aspect I find in relationships on cruise ships is the privacy aspect. The thing about, and I'm not talking about privacy like you can shut the door and do what you want to do, just the two of you. I'm saying, like, for me, a lot of it was, where on the ship can you go to get to know people? Crew bar. That's kind of it, right? Maybe if you can get off the ship together, maybe, but for the most part, it's crew bar. And crew bar is a very public atmosphere, right? So when you're sitting there talking with somebody, everyone sees you doing it. You see what I mean? And it's like high school, but like worse. It's like a bunch of immature adults in high school sometimes. It's worse, So I find that privacy, what it does for me is, like, let's say I had my own cabin. I'm not sitting here saying I want to bring girls to my cabin so we can shut the door and do what we do. I'm saying, like, having somewhere private to go, it gives you another option to get to know somebody in it gives you a different venue, right, than crew bar. Privacy also allows people to open up a little bit more. You see what I mean? Because if they're comfortable, for some people, for me especially, I'm more comfortable one-on-one with somebody, spewing out feelings sometimes or things I'm looking for, trying to get to know someone I'm attracted to. I'm more open in a one-on-one setting as opposed to a loud crew bar setting, standing next to all of our coworkers. You see what I mean? So having like your own room sets you up for just having more choices of venues to date. You see what I mean? Aside from other private benefits, I guess you could say. So the hardest thing for me was sharing a cabin with somebody and trying, and then if you get close with people and you start wanting to maybe share your bed together and sleep in the same bed together, you have a roommate, or if, let's say, you're on the top bunk or something, and it's a little teeny twin bed, so you're sharing a teeny tiny twin bed with two people on the top bunk, so you can't even sit up, so you're just kind of cramped, whatever, and then your roommate's on the bottom bunk, I mean, it's not romantic. Also, your relationship, if you have a roommate, or let's say the person you're with has a roommate and you go with them to their cabin, there's a third person in the room who just is front row seats to your relationship. You know what I mean? And so it's like, so your relationship is not private ever. It's just, it's at least one person sees you. It's like having, three people in a relationship. Every roommate you have is just adding someone to your relationship. It's hard. And then on top of that, I've had roommates who, one of my roommates had a girlfriend and he wanted her to sleep over every night, and I was like, dude, there's not enough room in our cabin for three people all the time. I'm sorry. You guys need to switch off. Sleep here one night, sleep in her cabin one night. If you really have to share the bed every night, you have to be aware of your roommates. Some people are not aware, and so the hardships you go through with that kind of thing as you get closer and closer with people you're in a relationship with. My second contract, I really didn't date anyone, or I didn't commit to anyone because it just I didn't really click with anyone, that contract, I guess, but it just is, sometimes it's a hassle, and I was like, man, sometimes just sleeping in this little bed by myself, it's fine, whatever, and then my third contract, I was dating someone for a while. The thing about her, she had a two-person cabin, but her roommate left, and then she didn't actually have another roommate move back into her room for 6 weeks. So we had the privacy to be together in a cabin. We still had a little bed, but we had a venue that we could be alone with each other to talk, to get to know each other better. It wasn't always crew bar. It wasn't always fighting the public in order to get some time together. You know what I mean? And so the relationships run a lot smoother. A lot of the more solid relationships I saw on that level were between people who, at least one of the members of that relationship had their own cabin, and I think it was for the same reason. A lot of times when you have your own cabin too, like let's say you're an officer, or maybe some of the singers in the production cast, they had their own cabin, but they also had a big bed, like a queen size bed. So if you have more than one person in that bed, you can, it's more comfortable to share. You know what I mean? And it's private. I mean, privacy. Privacy, you don't have it for the most part. Most positions don't have it, and it makes it just that much more. Can you make it work? Absolutely. But it's a challenge, you know. And so if you're up for the challenge, absolutely. Your contracts end. And if you're committed to each other, you can, this is also assuming you're both going to go back to ships. You can try to talk to human resources and really ask for special help trying to get put on the same ship together. Depending on your department and job, it might not happen. If you're married, they will help to put you on the same ship. But there's a chance you're not on the same ship, and then you're falling into this long distance thing. I have to be open and upfront with you. I'm not a long distance person. I've done it. I can do it. I can make it work. I don't think it's worth it because I want to be with the person I want to be with. It's not fair to me. It's not fair to them. I want to be with you. I want to be with you. That's what it is. So working on two separate ships, I'm not a fan. And there are temptations on cruise ships, man. I honestly wouldn't want to go, you know, if I was dating somebody on land and one of us got a job on a cruise ship and the other one stayed home, I really wouldn't want to do that either. The temptations are hard, and I've seen people make it work and be fine. I've seen people make it work and be miserable. I've seen people ruin a relationship. I knew a girl in the beginning of a contract who was infatuated with her boyfriend back home. He would come to visit. He came maybe 2 or 3 times on the cruise ship. And in the 6th month of her contract, they were done. And she was with some dude that she worked with in her department who lived in a different country. You know, maybe her and her previous boyfriend would have ended anyway, but even the most strong-willed people struggle, you know. So relationships are hard. I guess depending on the kind of relationship you're looking for. If you're married, you can live together. But let's say I knew one of the lounge bands. 2 of the members of the lounge band were married, and they'd been working on cruise ships for a long time. That was kind of their career choice, was to be musicians together in a band on the cruise ship. And they lived in the same cabin, but they had bunk beds. They had 2 twin-sized bunk beds because the level of their job level did not allow them an officer cabin with a big bed. You see, it's the marriage will only get you to the level of your stripes or whatever, but the ship isn't going to say, "Oh, you're married? Yeah, you can live in the captain's suite." That's not how it works. It's because it's work. And so the relationships, especially in the eyes of the company, always come second to the work, you know, and they might try to accommodate, but hey, man, they might not. You might get on the ship because you just start your contract, and they might have you in 2 separate rooms until they can get you in the same room. You see what I mean? So there's a lot of hurdles in cruise ship relationships that sometimes it's just there's only a certain amount of threshold before someone, especially someone like me, I'm just like, dude, I don't know. This is, you know, and some I stopped working on cruise ships for several reasons. And one of them is how hard it is to have true. I like relationships that are easy, and sometimes on cruise ships they're not easy, and so you're like, man, if I was on land, I could be myself, and we could be together, and it would be fine, you know. Also, with all relationships, friendships, work relationships, whatever, at the end of the contracts, you're saying goodbye to people. And if I mean, people who leave for their contract ending and you're still on the ship, you say goodbye to them. And then on your last day, you say goodbye to people who are still there. And I thought with every contract, I would get used to it and it would be emotionally less painful the more used to saying goodbye I got. But the truth about it, for me, the more I worked on ships, the closer I got to people. So the longer I was a crew member, by my third contract, saying goodbye to people was 3 times harder than it was on my first contract. And I don't know what it was. I don't know, just getting more comfortable with the cruise life and letting the vulnerabilities come out. Saying goodbye is hard, and that's just for friends, So add a romantic relationship to that, and But see, that's the thing. So then, if you're dating, you start having to talk. And this is the thing, you probably wouldn't talk about moving in together. You probably in a stereotypically normal relationship on land, you probably wouldn't move in together for several months, if not for a while. You wouldn't talk about long distance. You wouldn't say I love you. There's longer steps to the process, but on the cruise ship it's so much quicker. So like, let's say you meet somebody and you date for 2 months, and that their contract's over, you start saying, hey, should we date long distance? Should you move to my country? You see, from an outsider, this might look crazy. When you're in it, it's kind of the norm. Moves quick. A lot of the people who are successfully together on cruise ships have either decided together that they will make a full career for their life working on cruise ships, which is one way to live your life. The other group of subset of people I see that make it work really well are people who meet on the cruise ship and decide we want to stay together. Our relationship is more important than the job on the cruise ship, and they both decide to not work on cruise ships again. Those are, for me, the two choices that are likely to work pretty well. But both of those kind of disregard the whole long distance aspect, because I don't think you should go. I just don't think long distance is healthy. So those two choices. But then you think about, if I'm from America and the girl I'm dating is from, I don't know, the Philippines or whatever, one of you, if you want to stay together and you both decide to stop working on cruise ships, sounds like one of you is going to have to move to the other country. So you got to talk about that. And then you got to figure your life out. One of you will have to figure your life out. Not only will the person who stays in their country have to figure their life out, the other person has to move to a whole new country and also figure their life out. Some people are worth it. Some people make it work. Some people prefer it. I think it's great to do it if you do it the right way. But man, there's a lot packed. And I think if you've never worked on a cruise ship and you've never had, there's so many more aspects to the relationships than just meeting. At least at home, if you meet somebody from your hometown or like in the city you live and they live there, at least you both live there. You see what I mean? Like, it's a whole different ballgame. I would not be afraid to get in relationships if you work on cruise ships. I think you should. I think you should meet as many people as you can. I think you should be open to anything, because you never know what can happen. So don't go into it afraid of like getting hurt or oh no, like I only date people from my own country. You absolutely shouldn't be like that. If you look at it from like a logic standpoint, would dating someone from your own country be more likely to like work out in the long run? I guess you might be able to see it that way. But that's not a strong enough reason to disregard finding yourself in great, healthy relationships with other people strictly because you're from a different country or your contract's ended at a different time, or you have one of you has a roommate. You both have roommates, or 2 or 5 roommates, or whatever. So, or you work in a different. Now, I also find that most people end up kind of dating people they work with, which I understand why. The way I see it is People date people they work with, mainly because they're with them all the time. And because they're with them all the time, they get to know them better. And because they're getting to know each other more, they're more attracted to them. You see what I'm saying? So like being around somebody more, you grow closer because you've had more time together. And on cruise ships, because you work so much, the people you're really only around that much are the people you work with. So I get it. Do I think you should date people you work with? Not really, because you work with them and you're with them all the time, and that's one step less private because you're also around all the same other people who are looking in on your relationship. Now, I also say that I worked in an apartment with 2 people. It usually was another guy. So like, who's to say if I was in a bigger department with many more people in a dating pool that I could, I probably would have fallen into the same habits, just because it's not easier. It's just, it's helpful to have more people to be thrown in a group with more people that you get to know, and you're that close. I mean, you're close, man. You're close with these people, and so the way I saw it, majority of people who were dating each other tended to work and be in the same department together. Maybe I just was jealous because I didn't have a big group of people to get to know, So obviously the people I dated were not people I worked with, but it's because I didn't work with any. I had one person to work with, you know what I mean? And if you work with one person, I absolutely don't date that person. Please don't, because it's not enough people. No escape, right? So be wary of that. I mean, you can't help who you like, but I think we are adults and we're smart enough to know if I say, hey, you're dating your coworker, is it because they're the only, because is it because you haven't met anyone from another department? I kind of expect you to say, well, absolutely, but so you just got to be aware of what you're doing, and I knew some singers and dancers who these 2 girls, they had a pact. They said, we don't want to be single on the cruise ship. So they met 2 musicians during rehearsals in Miami before they came to the ship, and they kind of locked them down, and they dated the whole time. Coincidentally, those 2 singers also had their own cabin. The 2 musicians did not, but guess what? Those 2 musicians that were dating these 2 singers who didn't want to be single, they got to have the privacy in their own cabin. And I believe both sets of those couples are engaged now. And I don't believe any of them are back on ships. You see what I'm saying? So basically all the things I said. The 2 girls didn't want to be single, so they chased 2 guys. They had the same department. They had privacy in their cabin, so they got to know each other better. They also decided that they wanted to stay together, and they stopped working on ships. That's not the only way to go about it. That's not the way you should go about it. I'm not saying that there's a better way or a good way. I'm saying that you see how dating on cruise ships is just a completely different situation. So go out, meet people, fall for people, visit them in their own country. Do it. But if you think dating's hard on land, good luck.